It was a day as noir as night. That's the opening line of a poem by David St. John, which I'm going to be reading here today, or tonight. And now that we're all hiding out in our homes, taking refuge in place, we can usually distinguish day from night, but not always be sure whether it's Tuesday or Wednesday, or maybe Thursday. So this is me, my voice, my phone. I'm away sheltering in Bridgeport, California right now. I'm behind some gas station. You're wondering why you can't see me? Why I'm not on Zoom? I don't Zoom. It's not noir. I landline. Like Gloria Graham in The Big Heat, Barbara Stanwyck in Sorry Wrong Number, Richard Widmark in whatever this movie is, probably Kiss of Death, but mostly like Gloria Graham. Yeah, Gloria Graham in The Big Heat, just like that. Many of you, good citizens, you're sheltering at home and striving on behalf of the angels, really, following the rules, thinking about what's best for everybody, and baking cookies and still more cookies, and rediscovering the satisfaction of baking your own bread. You're the good people. But a worldwide pandemic, like any crisis, brings out the worst in the worst people, darker than noir, and so sordid it wouldn't even make for a good movie. Just a lousy exploitation movie. The other day, a security guard working for the dollar store in Michigan got shot in the head. Calvin Munnerlyn, that's his name, this guy. And they shot him because he wouldn't let some members of a family into the store without their face masks. So two of them came back and shot him. And then, on other fronts, there's this wonderful specimen of humanity. 50,000 years of human evolution, and we still have people like this around. Also, this is over in Michigan. I guess something's rotten in the great state of Michigan. They've got a good governor, though. This must be, it looks like the living dead protesting that they have to shelter in their crypts and coffins, and they want to come out during the day. Something like that. Something all these people have in common, it's not just who they voted for in 2016. There's something else, two things they have in common. All of them. One, none of them are fans of black and white movies of the 40s and 50s. And secondly, none of them read much contemporary poetry. Not good contemporary poetry anyway. You don't believe me? Just ask them. Ask him. Ask this guy next time you see him. Or somebody who looks like, in the same sensibility as this guy. Just ask him, what your favorite film noir? And who is your favorite contemporary poet? And get back to me. Let me know how that goes. All right, we are going to go to a poem that I promised you, that you've been waiting for, by David St. John, the longtime professor at USC, beloved poet of Los Angeles, influential, has done a great deal in the community and for poets of the community, as well as on the campus of USC. He was a finalist for the National Book Award for his book Study for the World's Body. His most recent book was The Last Troubadour, New and Selected Poems. He has 11 books. My God, 11. What have I been doing with my time other than watching a lot of films noir? And he also has a book I have to mention because it is his most noir collection of poetry called The Face, a novella in verse. Now, this poem, I'm going to open my book to the right place. One of the things I'm always trying to get my students, especially my more beginning students, to do or to try or to be aware of, a poem doesn't have to be about just one thing. It's not always just about that one memory you have of being introduced to the sport of fly fishing with your grandfather that summer back in 92, something like that. Sometimes a poem can move the way the mind moves, jumping and moving from thing to thing. And sometimes a poet does not necessarily know where the poem is going when he begins the poem. Or, alternatively, she begins the poem. David St. John is a poet like that. He's even said that he doesn't want to know where the poem is going to end up. This especially works well if you are a poet with a very interesting mind. If you're not a poet with a very interesting mind, I don't think I'd recommend this way of working. Because interestingness is everything in this sort of form, this approach to poetry. This poem is about more than one thing, even about more than two things. But one thing it's absolutely about is movement. Different ways that the mind can move, the imagination, the way a person can move through space and through time, the way language can facilitate movement. This poem is called XIX, as in Roman numeral 19. It was a day as noir as night. My own favorite line recently, rescued from a notebook I've been tossing from jacket to suitcase to shoulder bag. Today, I am movement, and simply all about movement and travel. In fact, I am moving at this very moment on the rapido between Rome and Florence. And don't you find that in and of itself terribly, moving? I mean, the thought of me writing to you, writing this, moving here through this cinematographic journal of the soul, since that's how I think of this work, how it's lit by silence and by pain. The cinematography of the soul. Another not-so-bad line, eh? You tell me what makes this tolerable, the pretension and arrogance of somebody announcing he's writing to you on the rapido between Rome and Florence. And in fact, the only thing that makes it tolerable at all is this knowing this poem has nothing to do with Italy, nothing at all, though, as you know, if you know shit about me or ever care to, Italy is where my heart is. Sappy, true, and more exactly, Rome is where my heart is. Florence, my mind and imagination. And don't forget Venice, that murky soup of dreams. It's that simple. No, this is a poem entirely about death. About murder, really. Death by murder. Murder as the stage of rage. The passionate articulation of envy, desire, jealousy, despair, and cool calculation. Yet, this is also a poem about style, attitude, blazing panache, and white, hot courage. Puzzled yet? You should be, because quite quickly, this is becoming a poem about my dead father and his own passion for the mystery novels of Chandler and Hammett, his favorite noir flicks of the 40s, and those S.S. Van Dyne books he treasured, all that elegance, a model for me in my adolescence. Think of it, Van Dyne right there alongside prancing Jim Morrison. Go figure. It was the smoky atmospheres of sex and mystery that stuck with me. From Bogart in The Big Sleep, or the Maltese Falcon, or Robert Mitchum in Out of the Past. All of those guys, too cool for school. All of them beat up and grown up, wiser and older than God himself. Oh, and even Elliot Gould in the Altman version of The Long Goodbye. His clothes suddenly slept in. Made my father laugh out loud each time, he said, looking sideways as he scraped a match along a stucco wall, amazed at some new absurdity in the world. It's okay with me. So life lived, my father taught me, is life darkened at the edges and made therefore more luminous at the heart. As I move now so roughly into this late and deeply mysterious adulthood, jagged and restless, cautious and desperate, so much of my past murdered in its bed, I sometimes want to be nothing. Nothing but movement, nothing but motion, the arc of departure, moving away from people and things and places. I need a little more of that tough guy, kiss my ass nonchalance these days just to get by. That's what I think. All motion, all moving away, away, just fucking away. Even as the train keeps moving farther from Rome, yet always closer, closer to Florence. David St. John. Wow. And don't we all find something in that poem to identify with, even though that poem is so specific and particular in every one of its details? And that, as I try to explain to the most beginning of my most beginning students, that's what makes a poem universal. Sometimes I have somebody coming into class with a poem that's all abstractions and statements like war is bad and peace is good and time goes on forever and oh my soul, and all those big amorphous meaningless abstractions and generalities, and they say, oh, but I've got to be general or my poem won't speak to everyone. And I have to tell them, no, right now you're just boring the bejesus out of everyone. And in order to be universal, you have to be specific. So, David St. John's poem was so specific to his father that it makes me think of my father, thinking of my father right now, and my own noir cred, which to some extent I inherited from my father. My father ran away to sea when he was 17. Now, we're not supposed to let somebody on the ship until they were 18. So he lied, said he was 18. Here he is somewhere around the shipyards, having run away to sea. You can kind of tell he's got a noir future ahead of him. So then, after a while, he was older, and he joined the U.S. Treasury Service agent, Secret Service agent in San Francisco, doing undercover work to capture the mafia. There's an Italian community there that had a couple or three mafia guys in it, I guess. So here he is in the shot that he had taken just as he was going to go undercover as a mob person. By now he had taught himself fluent Italian, loved the language, loved Italian music, loved Italian food, just didn't like the mobsters. He even liked some of the mobsters, but he arrested them anyway. So apparently, in order to be a mobster or a criminal, you have to have a 2, 3, 4 days growth of beard. I don't know why. I guess that's a criminal thing. And then here he is in Rome with my mother. We're to Rome again. You see how it all circles around. And so by now, he is stationed in Palermo, Sicily, which is why my earliest memories come from Palermo, Sicily, and why for a little while there I spoke Italian, then I forgot it all. His job was to set up a department to try to keep the mafia from coming into the country, our country. And he liked to admit every now and then a couple of them apparently slipped past him. And here he is late in life. Unlike most noir protagonists, he lived to the end of his life. Here he is approaching his 80th birthday, and he still has quite a few years to go. Quite a few years, as a matter of fact. So that's Keith Lummis. And if you have to wonder why I'm interested in crime stories, thrillers, and adventures, well, it might have something to do with it. Back to one little part of David's poem that I forgot. I forgot there's a footnote here at the bottom of his poem. Just slipped my mind. I think I had better read it right now. So here we go. Note, my Uncle Richard's favorite post-Merchant Marine story came from those years he worked on Bogart's boat, Santana, and how just after clearing the breakwater out of San Pedro, Bogart would, my uncle claimed, rip it out and piss off the side of the boat. A huge grin on his face, and my God, that guy was hung like a horse. Like any good poet, and I am a good poet, I know when I've seen a line, heard a line, or read a line that cannot be followed, because there's nothing left to say. So I'm just going to say, good night, ladies. Good night, gentlemen. And remember, always watch your back, look both ways, and don't let anybody treat you like you're two for a dime.